She wasn't crying. That was the first thing Jiang Dongsu noticed. Not the bruise, not yet. It was the way she set the tea down. Steady hands, lowered eyes, shoulders pulled back like someone who had learned long ago that falling apart was a luxury she could not afford. He had seen men beg for their lives in this office. He had watched rivals crumble under silence alone. But this woman, this quiet, precise, invisible woman, who had served his morning tea for 7 months without a single complaint. She moved through his space like someone carrying something heavy that no one was allowed to see. He almost let it go. He almost reached for the cup, opened his briefcase, moved on. Then she turned, and the light from the floor-to-ceiling window caught the left side of her forearm, and he saw it. 4 fingers, pressed deep into the skin just above her wrist, purple-blue at the center, yellowing at the edges. Not new. That bruise was at least 2 days old. Pause for a second. If that image just hit you, the steady hands, the quiet bruise, the silence she carried, don't sit there and watch like it's just another story. Tell me in the comments, have you ever hidden something painful and still shown up strong the next day? And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe right now and stand with this community. Because the people who stay here don't ignore what's uncomfortable. They face it. Dongsu set down his pen. Come here. Annabelle Chinello stopped walking. She did not turn around immediately. He watched her take a breath, slow, deliberate, the kind of breath that was really a decision. And then she turned. Sir? Your arm. Her eyes dropped to her forearm for exactly half a second. Then they came back up to his face. Neutral, composed, the expression of a woman who had been asked about her wounds before and had learned that honesty rarely helped. It's nothing. It's finger-shaped. Silence. Dongsu stood. He was not a tall man by Western standards, but he filled space differently, the way men do when every room they enter has always rearranged itself around them. He walked around the desk slowly, not toward her, just around it, and stopped near the window, giving her space, watching her. Who touched you? It doesn't concern you. You work in my house. With respect, sir, she said, and her voice was quiet, but it had an edge in it, something that had been sharpened by years of having to be polite while being disrespected. My body is not part of my employment contract. He looked at her for a long moment. She did not look away. Most people looked away. Sit down, he said. I have 3 more floors to Annabelle. It was the first time he had used her name. She had been here 7 months. 7 months of sir and ma'am, and the tea, and the silence, and the careful invisibility she had constructed like armor. He had never used her name. She sat down. Dongsu did not sit. He stood at the window and looked out at Seoul, the city he had inherited in blood and rebuilt in steel. And he said, without turning around, I have a board meeting in 18 minutes. Federal audit in 3 days. A rival family that has been watching my shipping lines for 2 months. He paused. And I am standing here asking you about a bruise. He turned. That should tell you something. Annabelle looked at him. Really looked at him. Maybe for the first time in 7 months. She had trained herself not to. She had trained herself to see the desk, the tea tray, the door. Never the man, never the eyes. Because eyes asked questions, and questions required answers, and answers required trust. And trust was something she had run out of a long time ago. It was an accident, she said. He picked up his phone, pulled up something, turned the screen toward her. It was the security footage from the east hallway. Timestamp. 2 days ago, 9:47 a.m., 22 seconds of static. The camera glitched, she said carefully. Security cameras in this building do not glitch. His voice was flat. They are wiped, manually, by someone with executive clearance. He set the phone down. An accident does not require executive clearance to disappear. The room was very quiet. Annabelle's hands were folded in her lap, and she was looking at them now, and he watched something move across her face. Not fear, not sadness exactly. Something older than both. Something that looked like exhaustion. The particular exhaustion of a person who has been waiting for someone to notice and has simultaneously been hoping they never do. "I handled it," she said. "You shouldn't have had to." She looked up sharply, like the words surprised her, like kindness aimed directly at her, still had the power to catch her off guard. Before she could respond, his phone vibrated, then again. Then his assistant's voice came through the intercom, clipped, urgent. "Sir, the board is assembling. Mr. Bayek is requesting your presence immediately. Yeah, there's a situation with the Pacific accounts." Dong-Soo did not move for 3 full seconds. Then he straightened his jacket, picked up his briefcase, and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "Don't go anywhere today," he said. Not a request. Then he was gone. Annabelle sat in his chair, in the chair of Jang Dong-Soo, the most feared man in organized Korean finance, the man whose name made shipping executives cancel vacations and whose foundation donations made senators return calls. And she sat in his chair, and she breathed. She pressed her right hand over the bruise, felt the shape of it. 4 fingers. She had not told anyone. She had not screamed. She had not reported it, because she knew exactly what happened to domestic staff who filed complaints against the names on those board plaques. She had simply gone back to her floor, finished her work, and carried it. The way she always carried everything. The way you learn to carry things when you grow up watching your mother carry them, and her mother before that, and the whole long line of women in your family, who were strong, because the world gave them no alternative. Annabelle stood, straightened the chair, walked to the door. She stopped. She turned back and looked at the room, the desk, the window, the city below, and something passed through her eyes that she did not allow herself to name. Then she picked up the empty tea tray and walked out. The board meeting was already burning by the time Dong-Soo entered the room. 12 people around a mahogany table that cost more than most people's apartments, and every single one of them was talking at once. In screens on the wall showing shipping routes, account summaries, red numbers cascading like a quiet disaster. His head of Pacific Operations, Young Hwan, was standing at the front, looking like a man who had not slept in 2 days, because he had not. Dong-Soo sat. The room quieted. "Explain," he said. Jung Hwan pulled up the accounts. 47 million across 6 international lines, not missing, displaced, moved through a series of shell transactions that cycle back to the same 3 holding companies. We've been trying to trace the endpoint for 16 hours. It doesn't trace cleanly. Theft? That's what we assumed initially. Jung Hwan hesitated. But the pattern doesn't match theft. Theft hides. This is... He paused, frustrated. This is something else. We don't know what. Dong-Soo looked around the table. 12 people. His CFO. 2 legal heads, 4 senior board members, 2 compliance officers, 2 external advisors, and Madame Oh Soo-jin, sitting at the far end of the table in a cream blazer, her hands folded precisely in front of her, watching the chaos with the particular patience of someone who already knew how it ended. Oh Soo-jin, 61 years old, matriarch of the O political family, the woman his family elders had spent 3 years maneuvering him toward, the arranged marriage that everyone in this building was waiting for him to announce. She met his eyes from across the table and smiled slightly. He looked away. "Does anyone have a working theory?" he asked the room. Silence. The expensive, embarrassed kind. The door opened. Everyone turned. Annabelle stood in the doorway with a tray, a refill for the coffee station along the far wall, and standard morning service. She was supposed to be invisible. She was always supposed to be invisible. She stopped when she saw the screens. Her eyes tracked the numbers. Quickly, very quickly. Then she looked at the room. "I apologize for the interruption," she said quietly and began to step back. "Wait." Dong-soo said it before he understood why. He had watched her eyes move across those screens. He had seen something happen in her face. Recognition, specific and immediate, the look of someone who has seen this pattern before. "Look at the screen," he said. "Sir, look at it." She looked. Her hand on the tray was perfectly still. "What do you see?" he asked. The room had gone very quiet. 12 powerful people watching a woman in a domestic uniform be asked a question they themselves could not answer. Oh, Sujin's smile thinned slightly. Annabelle looked at Dong-soo, then at the screen, then back at him, and he watched her make a decision. Watched her weigh the cost of speaking against the cost of silence, and choose, perhaps against her better judgment, to speak. She set the tray down on a side table. She walked to the screen. She pointed to a cluster of 3 transactions. These 3 here cycle back every 72 hours. Not randomly. On schedule. That's not theft architecture. Theft cycles break pattern to avoid detection. She traced a line across the screen with her finger. This is structured displacement. Someone is moving money in a loop to make the accounts appear active for audit purposes, while the actual endpoint capital is being held in a dormant trust. She looked at Jung-hwan. "Do you have access to the holding company registration dates?" Jung-hwan stared at her. Yes." "Pull them." He pulled them. She pointed. "Formed 14 months ago. 14 months is exactly 1 quarter before your last federal review cycle. Someone timed this to survive 2 audit windows before being detectable." She stepped back. The money isn't gone. It's been staged. Someone is creating the appearance of functional capital flow while structuring a position to pull equity quietly over the next 18 to 24 months. Total silence. Dong-soo looked at her. "How do you know this?" he asked quietly. She looked at him for a moment. "I've seen it before," she said, and nothing else. She picked up the tray. She walked to the coffee station, refilled it without a sound, and walked out of the room. After the door closed, and no one spoke for 10 seconds, then Jung-hwan said slowly, "She's right. The holding company registration dates." He clicked through his screen. "They align exactly. This is staged displacement, not theft." He looked at Dong-soo. "How did she—" "Find out who she is," Dong-soo said. Oh, Soo-jin spoke for the first time. "She's domestic staff." Her voice was perfectly pleasant. "Surely we have actual analysts who can take it from here." Dong-soo looked at her. "Find out who she is," he repeated to his security head. And then, "Run the holding company trace. I want the endpoint by this afternoon." He stood. The meeting continued, but his mind was already elsewhere. 2 floors down, Annabelle refilled the 3rd station of the morning and told herself she had made a mistake. She had spent 18 months being invisible. Invisible was safe. The invisible was the only currency she had left after everything else had been taken. "You don't see me. I don't threaten you. We both get what we need from this arrangement." That was the deal she had made with this city, with this job, with this life. And she had just walked to a screen in front of 12 board members and drawn a map. Her phone buzzed, a text from her nephew, Auntie Belle. "School says the tuition installment is late again. They said if it's not in by Friday, they'll withdraw my enrollment." She closed her eyes for 2 seconds, opened them, typed back, "I'll handle it. Focus on your exam." She put her phone in her pocket and picked up the tray and kept moving, because that was what you did. You kept moving. You handled it. You did not fall apart in a hallway where someone might see you, because the moment you fell apart, you were no longer competent. You were a problem, and problems got dismissed. Her sister Adaizi would have said, "Belle, why are you always the one holding the wall up?" But Adaizi was gone, and the wall still needed holding. She didn't know that 2 floors up, in a private office adjacent to the boardroom, Dong-soo was on the phone with his head of background investigations. "Her name is Annabelle Chinello," the investigator said. 38. Nigerian-American. Lagos-born, raised in Houston, Texas. She came to Seoul 14 months ago on a work visa initially, transitioned to domestic employment 8 months later. A pause. She was previously a senior compliance analyst, Tier 1 clearance. She worked for Meridian Capital Partners in New York for 6 years. Dong-soo was quiet. Or what happened at Meridian? She filed an internal discrimination report, documented a pay disparity scheme, 32 Black and Latinx employees across 3 divisions being systematically underpaid relative to comparable white counterparts. She built the case herself. Watertight. Another pause. The company settled privately. She was let go 8 months later. Standard restructuring language in the termination. But she was quietly added to an industry reference blacklist. Informal, untraceable, but consistent. She applied to 14 positions in New York and Chicago over the following year. None of them interviewed her past the first round. The silence in the room was different now. She didn't expose them publicly, Dong-soo said slowly. No, she had grounds for a lawsuit. She didn't pursue it. The investigator hesitated. There's something else. She has legal guardianship of a minor, her nephew. Her sister died approximately 2 years ago. Medical incident. The record notes inadequate diagnostic response. He paused. The hospital in question received a philanthropy grant 18 months ago from a foundation connected to your shipping operations. Dong-soo set down the phone. He sat very still. Outside his window, Seoul moved at its relentless pace. Cranes and traffic and neon, and all the machinery of a city that did not pause for private reckonings. He thought about a woman who built a watertight legal case against her own employer, and then chose not to detonate it. Who came to Seoul after her career was erased? Who showed up 7 months ago for a domestic position, overqualified by 6 levels, and said nothing? Who stood in front of his board this morning and dismantled a financial conspiracy in 2 minutes while holding a coffee tray? Who had a bruise on her wrist shaped like someone's fingers? Someone with executive clearance. He thought about the camera that had been wiped. He thought about Oh Soo-jin sitting at the end of the table with her folded hands and her thin smile. He picked up his phone and called his most trusted lieutenant. "Beck," he said. "I need to know who wiped the East Hallway camera on Tuesday morning." Bayek's voice was smooth, steady, the voice of a man who had been his right hand for 11 years. "I'll look into it personally." "Good," Dong-soo said. He hung up. He did not know, could not know yet, that Bayek already knew exactly who had wiped that camera, because Bayek had given the clearance himself. What happened next moved fast, the way disasters always do when they've been building slowly for a long time. By noon, the media had it. The headline hit 3 outlets simultaneously, never a coincidence, and it read, "Crime Lord's maid manipulates financial records." Below it, a series of photographs. Annabelle and Dong-soo in the lobby, a security frame, badly cropped, positioned to imply something that wasn't there. A fabricated employment document labeling her temporary domestic help, unverified status. And an anonymous tip circulating across 2 financial news blogs, suggesting she was not legally authorized to work in Korea. Annabelle saw it on her phone at 12:17 p.m. She was in the basement laundry room, which was where she went when she needed to think. Because the basement laundry room was the one place in this building where no one looked for her. She sat on a plastic chair between two industrial machines, and she looked at her face on a screen above a headline that made her a villain, and she felt something happen in her chest that she refused to call devastation. She had been here before, not this exact version, but the shape of it, the specific mechanics of watching your reputation get disassembled in public by people who were never going to put their names on it. She knew this shape. She had learned it the hard way in a glass and steel office in Manhattan, when she had done everything right, and it had still cost her everything. She thought about her nephew sitting in a classroom right now, studying for an exam. She thought about Adais, who used to say, "Belle, you are the strongest person I know." And she used to answer, "I'm not strong, I'm just tired of falling." She pressed her fingers over the bruise on her wrist, 4 fingers. She knew whose they were. She had known since Tuesday. She just hadn't known what it meant yet. Now she was beginning to understand. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You should leave before this gets worse. This is a warning, not a threat." She stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Who are you?" No response. She put her phone in her pocket and sat for another minute in the hum of the machines. Then she stood, straightened her uniform, and walked upstairs. Because she had a nephew who needed tuition paid by Friday, and she was not going to solve that from a laundry room. Dong-Soo saw the headlines at the same time as everyone else, and what he felt, the sensation that moved through him quietly, like a current, was not exactly anger. Anger was what he felt with rivals, with betrayal, with the kind of threats he was accustomed to navigating. This was something else. This was the particular coldness of watching someone methodically destroy a person who had not done anything wrong. He called his communications director. "Prepare a response." "Sir, the nature of the allegations. She is a senior compliance consultant, contracted through my office. Any suggestion otherwise is legally actionable." He paused. "Prepare the documentation to match that description and have it filed by 3 o'clock. That will involve retroactively." "I know what it will involve." His voice was flat. "You do it." He was not doing it for strategic reasons. He told himself he was, because strategy was a language he understood, and honesty was a language that still made him cautious. But the truth was simpler and more inconvenient than strategy. He had seen a bruise. He had seen the shape of it, and something in him, something that predated his empire, predated his training, predated every lesson about control and containment, and never letting the personal bleed into the professional, had simply not been able to ignore it. He called Bayek. "I've seen the media situation," Bayek said immediately. "It's bad. Whoever leaked this knew the exact pressure points. Immigration status, financial misconduct, inappropriate closeness with you. They hit all 3 in one cycle. This is not opportunistic journalism." "No," Dong-Soo said. "It's not. Do you have a theory?" "I'm working one." He kept his voice even. "What did you find on the camera?" "I'm still running it. The clearance trail is complicated, routed through 3 access points." A pause. "It may take until tomorrow." "Tonight," Dong-Soo said. "I need it tonight." "Understood." He hung up. He stood at his window. His phone was already full of messages from family elders, from the O-political team, from 2 board members asking for clarity on the media situation. The shareholder summit was in 4 days. The arranged engagement announcement, the one everyone was waiting for, the one that would consolidate the political alliance, was expected to happen there. And in the middle of all of it, he kept seeing a woman set down a teacup with perfectly steady hands while carrying a bruise she hadn't shown anyone. He called his head of security. "Find Annabelle Chinello. Wherever she is in this building, make sure she hasn't left, and don't make it obvious." "Yes, sir." He turned from the window. He had an empire to run, and a federal audit in 3 days, and a rival family circling his shipping lines. He also had a compliance analyst hiding in his domestic staff who had built and then deliberately buried a legal case that would have made her famous and rich, because she had chosen a different kind of integrity, the invisible kind. And he was beginning to understand that everything about her that he had initially overlooked was the thing he most needed to see. She was in the East Corridor on the 4th floor when his security head found her. "Mr. Young requests your presence," the man said quietly. "Private office, elevator C." Annabelle kept walking. "Tell him I'm working." A pause. "Ma'am, I heard you," she said. "Tell him I'll come when I'm done with this floor." She finished the floor. Then she took the elevator. He was in the smaller office, not the main one with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the mahogany and the city view. This one was quieter. Bookshelves, a couch, a table with 2 chairs. It looked like the room of a person who was allowed to occasionally not perform. He was standing when she entered. Jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He looked, and she registered this carefully, neutrally, filing it away, like a man who was actually thinking, not managing. "Sit down," he said. Then, immediately, "Please." She noted the please. She sat. He put his phone on the table and slid it toward her. The headline. The photographs. She looked at them, and then back at him. "I've seen them," she said. "I know." He sat across from her. "I'm responding officially. Framing you as a contracted compliance consultant. It will neutralize the employment claim. It will create a different problem," she said. "If I'm on record as a compliance consultant, then my prior work at Meridian becomes relevant background, and Meridian will push back on that characterization." He looked at her steadily. "You know about Meridian's informal network." "I built the case they settled. Yes, I know about their network." Silence. "Why didn't you sue them?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. It was a personal question. He knew it was a personal question. He was asking it anyway, and he was not asking it with the clinical detachment of an executive assembling information. He was asking it the way you ask something when you genuinely want to understand. She had not been asked things that way in a long time. "Because a lawsuit would have made me visible," she said. "And visible is dangerous when you don't control the narrative." She paused. "I had a nephew to take care of. I had to choose between being right in a courtroom and being functional in the world." She folded her hands on the table. "Invisible is underestimated. Underestimated is useful." "Not this week," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "Not this week." He looked at the phone, then back at her. "The Bruise," he said. "I need you to tell me who." "Why?" "Because it didn't happen in a vacuum. Someone in my building put their hands on you, had the footage wiped, and now there are media stories with your photo running on financial news platforms. If these are connected." She looked at him. She had spent 2 days running this exact calculation, deciding whether to trust the chain of cause and effect she could see clearly, deciding whether speaking it aloud would make it better or worse, deciding whether this man, this particular man in this particular position, was capable of doing anything useful with the truth. She had not decided yet, but she was closer than she'd been 2 days ago. "I need something from you first," she said. He waited. "My nephew, Obi. He's 17. He's enrolled in a school here on a student-dependent visa. The tuition is overdue and they'll withdraw his enrollment by Friday." She looked at him directly. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for the advance on a consulting contract that you're apparently now prepared to backdate anyway." He looked at her for one beat. Then he reached across the table and wrote a figure on a piece of paper. slid it toward her. She looked at it. It was 3 times what she had been about to ask for. She pushed it back. Half of that. Annabelle, half, she said. I don't take what I haven't earned. He looked at her. Something moved in his expression that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to it. Half, he agreed. She put the paper in her pocket. Then she said, it was Oh Soo-jin. The room went very quiet. She came to the East Corridor Tuesday morning. Annabelle continued, her voice even. I was there for the breakfast setup. She waited until the corridor was empty. She paused. She grabbed my wrist and she said, her exact words, women like you don't climb. You're carried, then discarded. Dong-soo was very still. She wanted me to react, Annabelle said. Raise my voice, make a scene, give her something she could use. I didn't. What did you do? I said, good morning, Madam O, and I finished the breakfast setup. He was looking at her, and she could not fully read his expression. Not anger. Or not only anger. Something more complicated. She had the footage wiped, he said. She had clearance too. You granted it when she joined as a board observer. Yes. His jaw was tight. I did. He stood, walked to the window, a smaller window in this room, looking at a different angle of the city. She watched his back, the line of his shoulders. She is the front runner for the political alliance, he said slowly. The engagement my family has been building toward for 3 years. The one everyone in this building is waiting for me to announce at the shareholder summit. I know, Annabelle said. You knew before today. I've worked here for 7 months. He turned. And you still told me. She met his eyes. You asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Long enough that she felt it. Not uncomfortably, just consciously. The way you feel the weight of someone's full attention when you have spent a long time being looked through. There's something else, she said. Tell me. She reached into her jacket pocket and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Printed documents. A chain of financial transactions. I've been gathering this for 3 months, she said, before I understood what it connected to. I was building a case around the hospital that treated my sister. She paused. St. Hyunjae Medical. She came in with symptoms that any competent attending should have flagged for immediate intervention. They dismissed her. Twice. She died from a condition that was entirely treatable if caught in the first 48 hours. Dong-soo sat back down. St. Hyunjae is part of a non-profit hospital network, Annabelle continued. That network receives philanthropic funding, rooted through a charitable trust. That trust, she said quietly, received capital from your foundation's shipping philanthropy arm 18 months ago. The silence in the room was complete. You didn't know, she said. It was not a question. She had been watching him long enough to know the difference between a man who had done something and a man who was just learning he had. No, he said. His voice was careful. The money in your foundation is clean. The pipeline it passed through wasn't. She turned the paper toward him. The hospital network has been using philanthropic status to funnel money from working-class community healthcare into a holding structure that reduces its liability for malpractice claims, which means families like mine. She stopped, let a breath out. When they dismiss a patient, when there's negligence, the claim hits a financial wall that was specifically engineered to make legal action not worth pursuing. Dong-soo looked at the paper. Your sister, he said. She had no idea, Annabelle said. She trusted the hospital. She was a good person who believed the system would take care of her if she showed up and followed the rules. Her voice did not break, but it was close. She followed the rules. He was quiet for a long moment. How long have you been sitting on this? He asked. Since I traced the funding pipeline 2 months ago, I've been verifying independently before. She stopped. Before what? She looked at him. Before deciding what to do with it. Another pause. Then he said, "There were encrypted messages between you and an individual connected to a federal investigation into my operations." She did not look surprised. He had access to her communications. She had known this was possible. "Yes," she said. "Who?" "A federal investigator named Park Ji-won. He's been running a parallel inquiry into the hospital network's financial laundering structure. We have been sharing documentation." She looked at him steadily. "Not about your empire. About the hospital. Those are different investigations that happen to share a funding trail. People will not see it as different." "I know that," she said. "I knew it when I started. I made a calculation." "What calculation?" "That the people who died because of that hospital mattered more than my own comfort." She said it plainly, without drama. "My sister mattered more than my safety. Families like hers, like mine, who get dismissed and die and never get justice because the system that hurt them also owns the process of accountability." She looked at him. "I wasn't betraying you, and I was doing what I was trained to do." The room held all of it for a moment. Then Dong-soo said quietly, "You could have come to me." And she said just as quietly, "I didn't know if I could trust you." The honesty of it sat between them. He nodded slowly. Not agreeing, accepting. "And now?" She looked at him. "I'm still deciding," she said. He didn't push. That, she noted, was the right answer. If you're still here right now, you're not just watching. You're feeling this. Be honest with me in the comments. Have you ever trusted a system that failed you or someone you love? Don't give me the polite answer. Give me the real one. And if this moment feels personal, subscribe and be part of a space where stories like hers are not forgotten. The people who stay through moments like this understand something deeper. Outside the building, the media cycle was accelerating. 2 more outlets had picked up the story. A third had added a manufactured detail, a source close to the organization, claiming that Annabelle had been seen accessing restricted financial records after hours. It was a lie built around a truth. She had been in the building at night. She had been accessing records, but not Dong-soo's. She had been building the hospital case. On the 4th floor, 2 of Dong-soo's board members were in private conversation. One of them, a senior member who had been with the organization for 15 years, was saying quietly, "This is getting messy. If the federal audit connects her to the investigation, the whole summit is at risk." The other board member, younger, a recently promoted, said, "Dong-soo seems unwilling to distance himself." "That's a problem." "Yes." Neither of them said what they were both thinking, which was that someone had moved with extraordinary precision to create exactly this crisis at exactly this moment, and that the timing, 3 days before a federal audit, 4 days before a shareholder summit, was too clean to be accidental. Bayek was in his private office when his phone vibrated. He looked at the message, read it twice. He deleted it. Then he called Dong-soo's head of security from a secondary line with a request that had nothing to do with the camera investigation and everything to do with making sure that certain pieces of the financial trail Annabelle had assembled would not reach the boardroom before the summit. He had been very careful. He had been careful for 11 years. He had built Dong-soo's trust methodically, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. Because trust was the most valuable currency in this world, and once you had it, you could spend it on almost anything. He had been spending it for 3 years, slowly, carefully. The arranged marriage to Oh Soo-jin was the final piece. It would consolidate the political alliance. It would give Bayek the one thing he still lacked, legitimate political protection that would make him untouchable, even if the organization's financial structures ever came under real scrutiny. Dong-su's personal feelings were irrelevant. They had always been irrelevant. Dong-su was the instrument. The empire was the mechanism. Baek was the architect. And this woman, this quiet, precise, invisible woman with her compliance training and her hospital documents and the inconvenient way that Dong-su looked at her, was a variable that had not been in the calculation. He needed to remove her before she dismantled everything. He had tried the subtle approach. He would need to be less subtle now. Annabelle was back on the 4th floor when her phone rang. Unknown number, different from the morning's message. She almost let it go to voicemail. Then something made her answer. Ms. Chinello. A woman's voice, clipped, professional. My name is Park Ji-won. We've been exchanging documents for 2 months, and I think it's time we met in person. A pause. Events have accelerated. Someone is moving to destroy your documentation before the audit window opens. Annabelle stepped into a quiet corner of the hallway. You're compromised as a source if we meet, she said quietly. I'm already compromised. Someone accessed my communication logs this morning. Within the next 24 hours, whoever is behind this will know the full scope of what we've been building. Park's voice was urgent but controlled. You need to secure your copies, all of them, not digitally. I have physical copies, Annabelle said. Where? She paused. Somewhere safe, she said carefully. Off-site. Yes. Good. A breath. Ms. Chinello, what we have is significant. The hospital network, the funding structure, the liability engineering. This isn't a small case. This is a systemic fraud that has resulted in preventable deaths across 4 hospitals in 2 countries. Park's voice dropped slightly. Your sister is not the only one. Annabelle closed her eyes for 2 seconds and opened them. I know, she said quietly. Then you understand why it has to move forward, regardless of what happens with the media situation, regardless of what it costs personally. A pause. I'm sorry. About the media. That's not from our side. I know whose side it's from, Annabelle said. After she hung up, she stood for a moment in the quiet corridor. She could hear faintly the sound of the city below, the relentless hum of Seoul. She thought about Adaeze. Her sister had been 34 years old. She had had a laugh that filled whatever room she was in, and a habit of calling Annabelle at 11 p.m. just to say something small, something ordinary. I made jollof rice today. You know the kind Mama used to burn the bottom of? The good kind. I burned the bottom. It was perfect. The hospital had dismissed her symptoms twice. In the 3rd time she went in, she did not come out. Obi had been 15. He had sat in a hospital waiting room for 9 hours before someone thought to come and tell him. Annabelle had flown in from New York. She had sat with him in that waiting room, already emptied, already cleaned, already moving on. And she had held her nephew's hand, and she had not cried, because he needed her not to. She had not cried until she was on the plane back to New York to pack her apartment. And then she had started building a case, because she did not know how to grieve without also knowing why. And she could not accept why, without also asking who. And once she knew who, she could not unknow it. She was very tired. But she was also, she recognized, exactly where she needed to be. She checked the time. The shareholder summit was in 4 days. The federal audit opened in 3. She had documents in a storage unit on the south side of the city, in a waterproof lockbox that she had installed herself on a Friday afternoon 3 months ago, when she had begun to understand that what she was building was going to make someone very afraid. She needed to make sure those documents were still there. She texted Obi. How was the exam? 3 dots. Then, I think I did okay. Auntie Belle, the school called again. I know, it's handled. Don't worry. A pause. Then, you always say that. She almost typed, because it always has to be. She typed instead, because I always mean it. Go to sleep. I'll call you tonight. She put the phone in her pocket. Down the hall, around the corner, in the boardroom that still held the ghost of the morning's crisis meeting, someone was printing a document. The document was a draft press release, prepared for Dong-Su's signature, announcing his engagement to Oh Soo-jin. It was dated for tomorrow. It had been prepared by Bayek. Dong-Su had not been shown it yet. She found out about the press release the same way she found out about most things in this building. She was invisible, and invisible people hear everything. It was the junior communications assistant, young, nervous, perpetually overcaffeinated, who left the printed draft on the copier tray by mistake while answering his phone in the hallway. Annabelle was passing with a linen cart. She saw the letterhead. She saw the date. She saw the name Oh Soo-jin in the second paragraph next to the word engagement. She did not stop walking. She did not change her expression. She pushed the cart to the end of the hall, turned the corner, and stood very still for approximately 4 seconds. Then she kept moving. Because what she felt, the specific sensation that moved through her chest, sharp and unwelcome, that she absolutely refused to examine, was not her business. It was not relevant. It was the kind of feeling that happened to people who forgot the terms of the situation they were actually in, which was, she was a woman holding documents that could dismantle a hospital network built on the deaths of people like her sister. And that was the only thing that mattered. That was the only thing she was allowed to let matter. She was not the protagonist of a love story. She was the protagonist of a survival story. Those were different genres. She finished the floor, returned the cart, and went to find Dong-Su. He was in the main office when she knocked, and 2 junior staff members were leaving as she entered. They passed her without looking, which was normal, because she was domestic staff, which was the same as furniture. And then, it was just the 2 of them in the room, with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the city below, and the tea she had made him 7 hours ago, cold now, still on the corner of his desk. He looked up. "Close the door," he said. She closed it. She did not waste time. "Your communications team has a draft press release announcing your engagement to Oh Soo-jin, dated tomorrow." His expression shifted. Not surprise. Something more careful than surprise. "Where did you see that?" "Copier tray, 4th floor." He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and picked up his phone. 3 seconds later, she heard a voicemail playing. His communications director came from this morning saying, "Mr. Bayek has requested we prepare the engagement announcement for final review. He indicated you had approved the timing." He set the phone down. The room was very still. "I did not approve the timing," he said. "I know," she said. "How do you know?" She looked at him steadily. "Because if you had decided to marry Oh Soo-jin, you would not have spent this morning doing what you've been doing." She paused. "You would have found a quiet way to make this problem disappear. You would have protected the alliance at my expense." He looked at her. "You've been watching me." "I've been watching everyone," she said. "It's what I do." He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out. She could see his reflection in the glass, the tight set of his jaw, the particular stillness of someone thinking at high speed. "Beck," he said. "I think so." He turned. "You think it's Beck?" The camera clearance had to come from someone with access above board level. The media leak was too precisely timed. Hitting all 3 pressure points simultaneously requires preparation, not improvisation. The engagement announcement being moved forward without your knowledge. She kept her voice even. "Someone is accelerating a timeline. They needed you married to Oh Soo-jin, before the audit opens, and they needed me gone before I could tell you why. Dong-soo was looking at her with the full weight of his attention. Why? He said. Why does the marriage matter to someone else more than it matters to me? Because Oh Soo-jin's family has political protection that extends to federal oversight bodies. If you are married into that alliance before the audit, any investigation into the hospital funding pipeline gets significantly more complicated to pursue. She looked at him. The financial laundering I traced doesn't just run through the hospital network, it runs deeper, and the person at the center of it needs that political cover. Silence. Baek, he said again. Quieter this time. The word had a different quality now. Not a question, not an accusation. The specific weight of a name you've trusted for 11 years, becoming something else in your mouth. I'm not certain, she said. I have a chain of evidence, not a confession. Show me. She had printed copies in her room. She had not kept them on any device connected to the building's network. She had printed them at a public library 3 weeks ago and kept them in an envelope that she brought with her every day in the inside pocket of her uniform jacket. She had not known, when she started carrying them, that this was the moment she was carrying them toward. She took the envelope from her pocket and laid it on his desk. He sat down and read. She stood by the door and watched him. She watched him track the financial chain, the charity trust, the hospital network, the liability engineering, the connection to holding companies she now recognized from this morning's board meeting. She watched the moment when he found the date that the primary holding company was formed, and then the date of his foundation's funding transfer, and understood the geometry of it. He read every page. When he finished, he set the last page down, and he was quiet for a long time. He's been my lieutenant for 11 years, he said. I know. He trained me. When my father died, when I had to take over the organization at 24 with half the board ready to move against me, he was the one who stood at my side. He said it without sentimentality, just as fact. He held the structure together while I learned to run it. I know, she said again, which is why he had 11 years to build something inside it that you couldn't see. He looked at her. How long have you known it was him? He asked. Suspected 3 weeks, known 2 days. She met his eyes, since the camera was wiped. You didn't come to me. I needed more documentation, and I needed to understand whether you already knew. Something crossed his face. You thought I might be complicit. I had to consider it. And now? She was quiet for a moment. Now I don't think you are. That's not the same as trust. No, she said. It's not. He looked at the papers, then at the window, then back at her, and his expression had shifted into something she had not seen on him before. Not the controlled executive, not the measured authority figure, but something rawer. A man sitting with the specific grief of finding rot in something he built with his hands. My foundation funded the hospital chain that let your sister die, he said. Your foundation was used. That's different. Is it? She thought about this, honestly. Power without accountability, she said slowly, makes you responsible for the structures your name enables, even if you didn't design them. She paused. But accountability changes that. What you do when you know, that's the measure. He looked at her for a long moment. My family elders will cut ties, he said. If I dissolve the O Alliance and expose Bayek publicly, I lose 30 years of consolidated political relationship. Rival families will move within weeks. The stock value of the legitimate holdings drops significantly. I know. The organization will be destabilized for months. I know that too. And you're still telling me to do it. She shook her head. I'm not telling you to do anything. I put the documents on your desk. What you do with them is your decision. He stood, walked around the desk, closer now, and she held her ground. She always held her ground. And he stopped a few feet away and looked at her with the kind of directness that most men couldn't sustain for more than a few seconds. "What would you do?" he asked. The question landed differently than she expected, not as a deflection, as a genuine question. The kind you ask when you want to understand how another person's moral architecture is built. "I would burn it down," she said quietly. "Every piece of it that was built on someone else's loss, and I would start over with the parts that were clean." She paused. "But I've also lost more than you have, so I make that calculation more easily." His expression was unreadable. "You think I haven't lost things? I think you built an empire specifically to ensure that you could never lose anything again." She said it plainly. "That's a different kind of loss." The room held the silence for a moment. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His jaw tightened slightly. "The O family's senior representative," he said. She stepped back toward the door. "I'll leave you." "Annabelle." She stopped. "The documents. I need the originals." "You have them?" She nodded toward the desk. "I kept copies off-site." "Smart." "Yes," she said simply. She opened the door. "Tonight," he said. "Don't leave the building." She turned. "Are you asking or ordering?" A pause. "Asking." She considered this. "I need to check something off-site. I'll be back by 9. He looked at her. She could see him calculating. The risk, the exposure, everything his instincts for control were telling him. "Take one of my drivers," he said. "I'll take a taxi." "Annabelle, I'll be back by 9, she said. And she left. He stood in the empty office for a moment. Then he answered the phone. The O representative was crisp, formal, and perfectly pleasant, in the way of people who use pleasantness as a kind of pressure. He expressed the family's anticipation of the summit announcement. He referenced the draft press release with mild surprise that it hadn't been formally approved yet. He said carefully that the family hoped there was no misunderstanding about the timeline. Dong-Soo listened to all of it. Then he said, "There's no misunderstanding about the timeline. There's a misunderstanding about the outcome." A pause. "I'll be in touch." He hung up. He stood at his window and looked at Seoul and thought about 11 years. He thought about Baek standing at his left shoulder at his father's funeral, keeping the organization steady while Dong-Soo learned what it meant to be its head. He thought about 100 late nights, 100 difficult decisions, 100 moments when he had trusted instinct, shaped by a man who had been shaping it toward a specific destination all along. He picked up the documents Annabelle had left and read them a second time. The architecture of it, the precision, the patience, the long game, was almost impressive. 14 months of setup, a financial structure that would survive 2 audit cycles, a hospital network, laundering liability protection through philanthropy, an arranged marriage designed to provide political insulation at exactly the right moment, and a bruise, a deliberate provocation. 4 fingers on a woman's wrist, he designed to spark jealousy in a man who was supposed to be controllable. The miscalculation, the single place where the architecture had cracked, was that Dong-Soo was not supposed to notice. He had spent a decade learning not to notice things that weren't strategic. Feelings, impulse, the pull of something that couldn't be quantified. He had trained all of that out of himself. Beck had helped him do it. Efficient, Beck used to say. Precise. Don't let the personal create exposure. But there was a bruise, and it was finger-shaped, and she had set the tea down with perfectly steady hands. And he had noticed. He called his head of security. "I need a private team on Baek, physical and digital, tonight." He kept his voice level, not visible. "Nothing moves until I say so." "Understood." and I need the federal investigator Park Ji-won's contact routed to my private line within the hour. A pause. Sir, that's an active federal. I know what it is, he said. Within the hour. The storage unit was on a quiet street in the south of the city, sandwiched between a laundry service and a hardware shop that appeared to have been there since before most of Seoul was rebuilt. Annabelle paid cash for the taxi and walked the last 2 blocks because old habit told her to. The lockbox was where she had left it, waterproof, combination lock. Inside, printed documents in a sealed envelope, a USB drive in a protective case, and a small notebook in which she had, over 3 months, written summaries of every piece of evidence in her own handwriting. Dates, sources, amounts, names. Including one page she had not yet shown Dong-soo. She opened that page and read it again, in the dim light of the storage unit. Her own name. Meridian Capital Partners. A compliance sign-off document dated 4 years ago. A pipeline authorization she had signed as part of her standard quarterly review. One of 40 documents, a routine batch, cleared by her supervisor as low-risk administrative filing. The authorization had been used 6 months later as one of 3 documentation anchors for the hospital network's initial charitable trust formation. Her signature, on a document she had never been told the downstream purpose of. She had found it 2 months ago. She had sat with it for a week before she could look at it clearly. She was not culpable. She knew she was not culpable. She had been deceived. The signature had been extracted under false framing, and no reasonable legal standard would hold her responsible for what had been done with it. But she carried it anyway. The way you carry things when you are a person who believes in accountability and have spent your whole life insisting that it applies to everyone, and then discover that it has to apply to you too, even when you didn't know. Even when you were the one who ultimately blew the thing open. She thought about what she had said to Dong-soo earlier. Power without accountability is violence. She believed it. She believed it about him, about the hospital network, about the men who built liability shields on top of negligence. She believed it about herself, which meant she was going to have to put her own name on the table when this came out. She was going to have to explain the signature and let it be examined and trust that the truth of it would hold up under scrutiny. And maybe it would. And maybe it would cost her something anyway. Both things could be true. She sealed the envelope back into the lockbox, took the USB drive, and closed the box. She put the notebook in her jacket pocket. She walked back to the main street and looked for a taxi. It was 7:43 p.m. She had told him 9 o'clock. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She answered, breathing. Then a voice she recognized. Low, male, controlled. Bayek. Ms. Chinello, he said. We should talk. She said nothing. I know where you are, he said. I know what you just took from storage, and I know you're going to take it to Dong-soo tonight. A pause. I would like to suggest an alternative. I'm listening, she said. Because she was. Information was always useful. Leave Seoul, tonight. I will ensure your nephew's tuition is covered for the remainder of his enrollment. I will have the media stories retracted by morning. I will clear your name from the record entirely. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who had made this kind of offer before. You take your nephew and your documents and your dead sister's story, and you go home. And this ends cleanly. She let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. And the hospital network, she said, will be restructured under new oversight, gradually. Gradually, she repeated. Change takes time. My sister didn't have time, she said. The families currently receiving inadequate care don't have time. She kept her voice even. You're asking me to trade their safety for mine. I'm offering you a way out that doesn't destroy everyone involved. It doesn't destroy you, she said. That's different. A pause. The quality of the silence on the line changed slightly. Something that might have been surprise, or might have been recalibration. You're making a mistake, he said. I've made them before, she said. I own them. Can you say the same? She hung up. Her hands were steady. She registered this, the steadiness, the absence of trembling, and understood it as something other than calm. It was the stillness of a person who has been afraid for a long time and has finally arrived at the thing they were afraid of and found that they can stand inside it. She found a taxi. She was back in the building at 8:51 p.m. Dong-soo was still in the main office. He looked at her when she came in, a quick, comprehensive look, the kind that checks whether a person is intact, and something in his expression relaxed slightly when she was. Beck called me, she said. He stilled. She told him everything. The offer, the wording, the smoothness of it. She did not editorialize. She laid it out the way she laid out financial chains, plainly, completely, in sequence. When she finished, he said, "He knows you were at the storage unit." "Yes. He has someone following me." "Since when?" "Probably since this morning, maybe earlier." She paused. "He's not going to move against me directly. The exposure is too high. He's in containment mode. He wants me gone before the audit, not arrested." "An arrested domestic worker creates less heat than a dead one," Dong-soo said grimly. "That's the calculation." She put the USB drive on his desk. "This is everything. Digital copies of all documentation. The hospital records, the funding chain, the liability structure, the holding companies." She paused. "And one more thing." She put the notebook on the desk. He looked at it. "Open to the last section," she said. He did. She watched him read, watched him find her name, the Meridian compliance document, the pipeline authorization. She watched his eyes move through it, and she stood straight and still, and did not try to preemptively explain or soften. He read it twice. Then he looked up. "You didn't know," he said. "No, but my signature is there." "They deceived you." "Yes, and I'm telling you anyway." She held his gaze. "Because if I'm going to put this in front of a federal investigator and ask them to trust the integrity of my documentation, I have to put all of it in front of them, including the parts that are uncomfortable for me." He was quiet for a moment. "Most people wouldn't do that," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm not most people." A beat, and then quietly, "No, you're not." The room held the weight of that for a moment. Outside, Seoul hummed on. Somewhere in the building, Beck was in his office, making calls she would never hear, managing a structure that was beginning, in ways he could feel, but not yet see, to come undone. Dong-soo picked up the USB drive and the notebook. "I spoke with Park Ji-won," he said, 40 minutes ago. She's prepared to move the hospital investigation into the formal audit window, absorb it into the federal review. If I cooperate fully and provide internal documentation, it changes the trajectory significantly. "What did you tell her?" "That I would cooperate." He set both items in his desk drawer. "That I needed 24 hours. "Why 24 hours?" He looked at her. "Because the shareholder summit is in 4 days. And I need to decide what I'm willing to lose before I can decide what I'm prepared to say publicly." She understood this. "Are you asking me to wait?" "I'm telling you what I'm doing," he said. "You asked for trust. I'm showing you my process." She looked at him for a long moment. He was not asking her to be silent. He was not asking her to disappear. And he was showing her the interior of a decision, the actual cost of it, laid out honestly, and asking her, without asking, to witness it. That was different. 24 hours, she said, and then it moves regardless. Agreed. She turned to go. Annabelle. She stopped, turned back. He was looking at her across the desk, and the documents and the city behind him, and his expression was, she searched for the right word and could not find one that was precise enough, because the right word was complicated. It was the expression of a man who had built a fortress around himself and was now looking at it from the outside for the first time and seeing what it had cost. "The Bruise," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner." She was quiet for a moment. "You asked," she said. "That's more than most." She left. In the elevator on the way down, she stood and looked at her reflection in the brushed steel doors. She looked at the line of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, the wrist where the bruise was fading now to a dull yellow-green at the edges. 4 fingers, a message, a provocation designed for him, delivered on her body. She thought about Oh Soo-jin saying, "Women like you don't climb. You're carried, then discarded." She had spent 2 days carrying that sentence, turning it over, feeling the specific weight of it. Not the insult, but the intent behind the insult. The assumption that she was a variable, that she was movable, that she existed in someone else's story as a complication to be removed. She looked at her reflection. She was not a variable. She was the person who had walked into a board meeting with a coffee tray and told 12 powerful people exactly what was wrong with their financial architecture. And she had been right, and no amount of manufactured headlines was going to change the documentation she had spent 3 months building in a library and a storage unit, and the quiet hours before dawn when the rest of this building slept. She was not going to be discarded. She was going to stand at a podium. Not yet, but she was going to get there. The elevator doors opened. She walked to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and called Obi. He answered on the second ring. "Auntie Belle." "How was the exam, really?" she said. "I think I passed." A pause. Maybe aced it. Another pause, and she could hear him trying to be casual. "The school confirmed they got the payment today. They said it was actually more than the outstanding amount, that it covered next semester too." She closed her eyes. "Good," she said. "Auntie Belle." His voice was 17 and careful. "Are you okay?" She thought about a bruise, a camera that was wiped, a press release drafted without permission, a phone call from a man who had offered to buy her silence, a man who had asked about her wrist before his board meeting. "I'm working on something," she said. "That's not what I asked." She smiled. He sounded sometimes so much like a Daisy. "I'm okay," she said. "I promise." "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Obi." "I'm just asking." "I'm sure," she said. "Study, sleep." "Okay." A pause. "I love you, Auntie Belle." "I love you," she said. She hung up. She sat in the quiet, and then she opened her notebook to a clean page and began to write. Tomorrow there would be confrontation. There would be Bayek's next move, whatever it was. There would be the 24-hour window that Dong-soo had asked for, and the decision he was going to have to make at the end of it. There would be the audit, the summit, the rival family, the political alliance, all of it bearing down at once. But right now, in this room, she wrote. She wrote everything she knew, in order, in the clear and careful hand of a woman who had learned that documentation was the one form of power that could not be taken from you as long as you kept making it. 2 floors up, Dong-soo was on the phone with his family's senior elder. The conversation was brief, and it was hard, and it ended with the elder saying, very quietly, "Think carefully about what you're risking." And Dong-soo saying, "I am." He sat for a while after. He thought about a man who had stood at his shoulder for 11 years and built something underneath while he was looking forward. He thought about the specific texture of betrayal from someone you trusted, not the sharp kind, the kind that announces itself, but the slow kind the kind that was only visible in retrospect, and only if you were willing to look. He was willing to look now. He opened his laptop and typed a message to Park Ji-won. 3 sentences, his confirmation of cooperation, his request that the hospital investigation be formally absorbed into the audit window, and 1 additional line. I have an individual with direct documentation of the full financial chain. She will need independent legal protection before she appears on record. He sent it. He closed the laptop. He picked up the notebook Annabelle had left and turned to her signature page and read it again. The honest, unsparing accounting of her own implication in a chain she had not designed and had ultimately dismantled. He thought about what it cost to put that on paper, to hand it to a person you were still deciding whether to trust. He thought about all the things he had made invisible in his own empire by not looking. He thought about a bruise. Outside his window, Seoul was bright and relentless, and did not care about the reckoning that was building in a high-rise above its streets. The city had seen reckonings before. It would see them again. But this one, Dong-soo thought, was going to cost him something real. He found, unexpectedly, that he was prepared to pay it. Not because the documents left him no choice. He had been in positions before where the documents left him no choice, and he had found creative paths around them. But because he had asked a woman about her wrist before a board meeting, and she had told him the truth. And then she had gone on telling him the truth, even when it implicated her. Even when she had no guarantee it would be received well. Even when everything in her history had taught her that truth was a luxury that got taken from people like her first. She had told him anyway. He owed that something. He owed it more than a carefully managed political maneuver. He sat in the quiet of his office, and for the first time in a long time, Jang Dong-soo let himself sit with the full weight of what he was going to do, and what it would cost, and why it was still worth it. In her room 2 floors down, Annabelle wrote until midnight. Then she put the notebook away, turned off the light, and slept. She did not dream about Adiz, which sometimes happened when things got hard. Her sister's voice calling from some nearby room she couldn't find the door to. She dreamed about a podium, a room full of people. Her own voice, steady and clear, saying something that mattered. She did not know yet what she would say, but she would be standing there. That much she knew. The morning came fast. It always did, when something was about to break. Annabelle was on the first floor at 6:15 a.m. Earlier than usual, the corridors still quiet, the city outside still gray and unhurried. And she was setting up the executive breakfast station when she heard footsteps that she recognized not by sound, but by cadence. The particular rhythm of someone who moved through space with the confidence of a person accustomed to owning it. She turned. Beck stood at the end of the corridor. He looked at her for a moment. He was a composed man. She had watched him for months, and she had never seen anything read on his face that he had not put there intentionally. 60 years old, silver hair, the kind of stillness that came from absolute confidence in your own position. But this morning, something was slightly different. She had refused his offer last night. He had not expected that. He walked toward her slowly. She did not move. She kept her hands on the breakfast tray and stood straight and met his eyes. He stopped 2 meters away. Good morning, Ms. Chinello, he said. Good morning, she said. Early start. Always. He looked at the tray, then at her, then at the wrist that Oh Soo-jin had gripped on Tuesday morning. The bruise now fading, but not gone. A flicker of something moved through his expression. You're still here, he said. I said I would be, she said. A pause. My offer stands. So does my answer. He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. She did not flinch, and she did not perform bravery. She was simply present, which was its own kind of fortification. "You're very certain for someone in a very uncertain position," he said. "I've been in uncertain positions before," she said. "I'm still here." He was quiet. Then he said, very quietly, "You think he'll choose you over everything he's built?" She looked at him. I think he'll choose what's right," she said. "Whether that includes me is a separate question." Something in his expression shifted. Faint, almost imperceptible. It might have been recalibration. It might have been, for just a moment, something that looked like recognition. The involuntary acknowledgement of someone who meets a kind of integrity they had not budgeted for. It disappeared immediately. "Finish the breakfast setup," he said. He walked away. She watched him go. She turned back to the tray. Her hands were perfectly steady. Somewhere above her, an elevator hummed. The building was waking up. Seoul was waking up. In 3 days, the federal audit would open. In 4 days, the shareholder summit. The next 24 hours were going to decide everything. She picked up the tray and moved forward, the way she always did. Quietly, precisely without announcement, carrying more than anyone in this building had ever thought to ask about. Not for much longer. The morning of the shareholder summit arrived the way all defining days do, unremarkably. Gray sky, traffic below. The building humming with the particular energy of people who knew something significant was about to happen, but did not know its shape yet. Annabelle was up at 5. She did not have a role at the summit. She was domestic staff. Her job today was the same as every other day. Breakfast stations, linen carts, invisible movement through corridors that would be full of shareholders, board members, political representatives, and press. She would serve tea while the future of an empire was decided 10 meters away. That was the plan. She put on her uniform. She looked at herself in the mirror. The bruise was almost gone. A faint shadow, yellowing at the edges, barely visible unless you knew to look. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at her own face, the set of her jaw, the steadiness of her eyes. And she thought about Edie's saying, "Belle, you were always the one who walked toward the thing instead of away from it. I never understood how you did that." She had never been able to explain it satisfactorily. It was not courage exactly. It was more like the recognition that the thing you were afraid of was going to exist, whether you walked toward it or not. And at least if you walked toward it, you had some say in what happened next. She picked up her notebook, took the USB drive from under her mattress, and put both in her jacket pocket. Then she went downstairs. The summit hall on the 2nd floor had been transformed overnight. Round tables with pressed linen, name placards for 200 shareholders and board representatives, a raised platform at the front with a podium and 3 chairs, and the organization's crest, projected on the screen behind it. Staff moving quickly and quietly in the margins. Camera crews setting up in the back. Financial press. 1 or 2 political correspondents. Annabelle moved through it all with her cart. She was setting the coffee station near the east wall when she felt a presence stop beside her. She looked up. Dong-soo. He was in a dark suit, the kind that said authority without trying to. He looked like a man who had not slept much, which she recognized because she had also not slept much. But he had the particular composure of someone who had made a decision and was now simply executing it. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You're ready," she said. It was not a question. Yes. He paused. "Are you?" She reached into her jacket pocket and placed the USB drive in his hand. The physical copy of everything. The final transfer of documentation from her keeping to his. He closed his fingers around it. "I put my own name in the record," she said quietly. "The Meridian signature. It's all there, unedited." He nodded. Park Ji-won has been briefed. You have independent legal protection from this morning. Whatever comes out today, your position is documented and protected. She absorbed this. You moved fast. I had 24 hours, he said. I used them. She looked at him. This man who had noticed a bruise before a board meeting and had not let it go, who had read 11 years of betrayal in a financial document and sat with it, who had called a federal investigator at night and arranged legal protection for a woman who had refused to stay quiet. And she felt something settle in her chest that she had not felt in a long time. Not safety exactly. Something more honest than safety. Recognition. The particular sensation of being seen clearly by someone who was not looking away. The O family is in the building, he said. Beck arrived an hour ago. He doesn't know yet what I've done. A pause. He will know when I step to that podium. He'll move against you afterward, she said. He'll try. His voice was even. The federal warrant is being processed. See, Park Ji-won has a team outside. The moment I make the public statement, Bayek's leverage disappears, and the warrant executes. He looked at her steadily. It will be over within the hour of my speaking. She nodded. There's a cost, he said. I know. 30% stock drop projected. Political alliance collapse. 3 of the family elders have already indicated they'll cut ties. He said it plainly, not asking for sympathy, accounting. The rival family in Busan has been watching for an opening. This will look like one. It won't be, once the full record is public, she said. Legitimate restructuring with federal cooperation is defensible. An empire maintained by covering a man who laundered money through hospitals that killed people is not. That's the long view, he said. That's the only view that matters, she said, and he looked at her. I need you in the room today, he said. Not at the back, not at the coffee station, in the room. She was quiet for a moment. I'm domestic staff. Not after today. She looked at him steadily. What am I after today? Whatever you decide to be, he said. But today you stand in that room when I speak, because what I'm going to say involves you, and you deserve to be present when it's said. Something moved through her. She held it carefully. She did not let it become more than it was, because she was still a woman who had learned the cost of assuming too much from a man who had power over her circumstances. But she also could not deny what she heard. The specific quality of it, the directness, the way it landed not as a command, but as a request, not as an order, as an invitation. All right, she said quietly. He nodded once. He turned to go. Dong-soo. He turned back. It was the first time she had used his name. She saw him register it. Whatever happens after, she said carefully. I have conditions, before I agree to any formal role in whatever comes next. Tell me, he said. I oversee the hospital board restructuring personally, not as an advisor, as a named accountability officer with independent authority. She kept her voice level. My nephew's education trust is set up independently of your organization. His security cannot be contingent on my continued employment. Done, he said immediately. And I am partner in the reform structure, not staff. Partner. Equal voice on decisions related to the foundation and hospital network. He looked at her for a long moment. Equal voice, he repeated. You want someone who makes you accountable, she said. That's not a subordinate role. A beat. Something shifted in his expression, not resistance, the opposite of it. The look of a man recognizing the precise terms of an arrangement that was honest. Agreed, he said. She held his gaze. I'll be in the room. He walked away. She stood at the coffee station for a moment. Then she set down the tray. She straightened her jacket. She walked to a seat at the far side of the room, near the wall, where she could see everything. The podium, the tables, the door, the camera crews in the back. She sat down. She waited. The room filled over the next 90 minutes. Shareholders in suits, board members in careful clusters, the O family's delegation at a prominent table near the front, O Soo-jin in ivory, composed, expectant. The expression of a woman who had been told the announcement was happening today and had no reason to doubt it. Baek sat 2 tables over, facing the podium. His posture was relaxed. His expression was neutral. He looked like a man in complete control of the environment. He did not look toward the east wall, where Annabelle sat. She watched him anyway. The room settled. The summit chairperson opened formally. Welcome agenda, procedural language. 2 preliminary speakers, quarterly results, a restructuring update, the careful machinery of a major organization moving through its formal business. And then, Dong-soo stood. The room adjusted itself immediately. Posture, attention, the collective alignment of people in the presence of someone whose authority they had accepted. He walked to the podium. He set down nothing. No notes. No prepared remarks. No cards. He looked at the room. I'm going to depart from the prepared agenda, he said. The chairperson shifted slightly. At the O table, Soo-jin's expression remained composed, but her hands moved, a small adjustment, almost imperceptible. Baek did not move at all. 3 days ago, Dong-soo said, I sat in a board meeting and watched a financial anomaly get dismantled by someone in this building who had the expertise to see it clearly. That person was not on the agenda. She was serving coffee. He paused. Her name is Annabelle Chinello. The room stirred. He looked toward the east wall, directly at her. 200 people followed his gaze. Annabelle did not look down. She held his eyes. She held the weight of 200 people looking at her, and she sat straight and still and let them look. Ms. Chinello is a senior compliance analyst, Dong-soo continued. She was formerly with Meridian Capital Partners in New York, where she built and documented a racial pay discrimination case that resulted in a private settlement. She was subsequently blacklisted from the industry. His voice was level, precise. She came to this organization and took a domestic position because it was the only position available to her in this city. She has been working for the past 3 months in her own time on a financial investigation that directly implicates this organization's philanthropic structure. The room was completely quiet. Oh Soo-jin's composure had fractured slightly, not visibly to most, but Annabelle was watching her hands. Baek had still not moved. I am going to tell you what she found, Dong-soo said. And then I am going to tell you what I am doing about it. And then I am going to answer every question in this room, regardless of what it costs. He spoke for 22 minutes. He laid out the hospital network, the funding pipeline, the liability engineering, the structured displacement of capital across 6 international shipping lines. The holding companies formed 14 months ago, timed to survive 2 audit cycles. The connection between the charitable trust and the organization's foundation. He named the hospital where Adaeze Chinello had died. He named the diagnostic failures. He named the financial structure that had been engineered specifically to make legal accountability for those failures impossible. He named Baek. Hold on. This is the moment. He just chose truth over loyalty. So I need to know. Are you standing with him right now, or do you think he should have protected the empire? Drop it in the comments. Team accountability or team preservation? There's no neutral ground here. And if you believe power should answer for what it enables, like this video and subscribe. Because silence is how systems stay broken. The room erupted, not loudly. This was not the kind of room that erupted loudly. It was the controlled eruption of powerful people, recalibrating at high speed, voices overlapping, chairs moving, phones coming out. The O delegation was on its feet. 2 board members were already on calls. The press section in the back was alive. Beck stood. He was very calm. He looked across the room at Dong-soo. His expression was the expression of a man who had prepared for multiple outcomes and was now selecting the appropriate response for this one. "These are serious allegations," he said. His voice carried easily over the noise, measured, authoritative. Made without board process, without legal review, and apparently sourced from an individual with clear motivation to damage this organization's reputation. He looked toward Annabelle. An individual who, I should note, signed compliance documents that directly enabled the financial pipeline he is now describing. The room paused. Annabelle stood. She had not planned to stand, or perhaps she had, somewhere underneath the planning, and in the part of her that had been moving toward this moment since she sat in a hospital waiting room with a 15-year-old boy, and understood that silence was not the same as safety. She stood. The room looked at her. "My signature is in the record," she said clearly. Her voice was steady. "I signed a routine compliance authorization at Meridian Capital 4 years ago as part of a standard quarterly batch. That document was subsequently used, without my knowledge, as one of 3 anchors for the hospital trust formation." She looked at Beck directly. "I disclosed this myself. I put my own name on the table before any of it became public, because that is what accountability looks like." She paused. "Can you say the same?" Silence. "The full documentation has been submitted to Federal Investigator Park Ji-won," she continued. "It includes the financial chain, the holding company structure, the hospital liability engineering, and the internal communications, authorizing the security footage deletion from this building on Tuesday morning." She looked at Bayek, including the clearance trace. Bayek's composure was still intact, but she watched something happen in his eyes, the specific recalculation of a man who had just understood that the architecture he had spent 3 years building was not going to survive the next hour. He turned to Dong-soo. "You're destroying 11 years. Dong-soo looked at him. "You destroyed 11 years, he said quietly. "I'm just refusing to cover it." The doors at the back of the room opened. Park Ji-won walked in with 2 federal officers and a document that Annabelle recognized from 30 meters away by its header alone. In the warrant. Baek turned, looked at the officers, looked at the room, the shareholders, the board, the cameras, Oh Soo-jin standing frozen at her table, the entire assembled machinery of an empire in the middle of reckoning. He straightened his jacket. He walked toward the officers with the composure of a man who had decided, even now, to control the manner of his exit. He stopped beside Annabelle as he passed. He did not look at her. He said very quietly, "You think he's clean?" She looked at him. "I think he's trying to be," she said. "That's enough." They took him through the door. The room was in pieces around her. At the front, Dong-soo stood at the podium and let it be in pieces. He did not rush to manage it. He did not smooth it over with reassurances or strategic language. He stood in the middle of what he had chosen to detonate, and he let the room feel the full weight of it. It cost 30% stock value by the end of the day. The O family delegation left without speaking. 3 of the family elders called before evening. 2 board members resigned by midnight. And in the late afternoon, the hospital network's board received notice that a federal accountability review was opening, effective immediately, with an independent oversight officer named to lead the restructuring process. Her name was Annabelle Chinello. The weeks that followed were the hardest kind of work, not dramatic, not summit room confrontation, but the grinding, document-heavy, meeting-dense labor of building something honest from the wreckage of something corrupt. Annabelle worked 14-hour days. She reviewed hospital records, interviewed staff, mapped the liability structures against actual patient outcomes. She found 43 cases across 4 hospitals in 2 countries, where diagnostic failures had resulted in preventable deaths. She documented each one. She built the accountability framework that would prevent the next ones. She called Obi every night at 9. He had heard about the summit through news coverage, a filtered, imperfect version, but enough. He had called her and said, "Auntie Belle, you were on the news." She had said, "How was your exam?" He had said, "You were on the news." She had said, "Obi." He had said, very quietly, "She would have been so proud of you." She had not cried on the phone. She had cried after, in the way she had learned to cry, briefly, privately, completely, and then forward. Dong-soo restructured the foundation. He replaced leadership across the hospital network. He cut the political alliance, absorbed the financial fallout, and spent 3 months in conversations with family elders who did not forgive him quickly, and some of whom did not forgive him at all. He did not ask Annabelle to witness any of that. She witnessed some of it anyway, because they were working in the same building on connected problems, and because the particular dynamic between them, the one that had begun with a bruise and a cup of tea and a question asked before a board meeting, had become something that occupied the space between professional and personal without fully belonging to either. They argued, regularly, productively, sometimes loudly, about the pace of the hospital restructuring, about the foundation's new governance model, about the role of the organization's legitimate business interests in the reform process. She told him when he was wrong. He told her when she was being inflexible. Neither of them backed down from the argument until the argument produced something better than either of them had started with. It was the best working relationship she had ever had. It was also, she recognized, with the careful honesty she applied to everything, becoming something else. Slowly, in the margins of the work, in the way he asked her opinion before decisions, not after, in the way he came to her office now, not a laundry room, when something was difficult and sat down without preamble and simply said, "Tell me what you see." In the way she had started saying his name. She did not rush it. She did not perform it. She let it be what it was, which was new and uncertain and complicated by everything that had preceded it, and she decided that complicated was not the same as wrong. The hospital reopening was 8 weeks after the summit. St. Hyun-jae Medical, now operating under the new network oversight structure. New board, new diagnostic protocols, new accountability reporting. 43 families who had been contacted directly and offered reparative support. Not as a legal settlement designed to contain liability, but as an honest acknowledgement of what had happened. The ceremony was small by the standards of these things. A morning gathering in the hospital's main atrium, local press, community representatives, hospital staff, the new board. Annabelle stood at the podium, and she had written her remarks 3 times and thrown them away twice, and finally written them in the notebook. The same notebook she had carried for 3 months in a jacket pocket, the one that held the financial chains and the liability maps and her own signature on a document she hadn't understood. She looked out at the atrium. In the 3rd row, Obi sat in a school uniform, trying to look older than 17 and succeeding about halfway. He had come in from school for this. He had not asked if he could come. He had told her he was coming, which was the most Adaise thing he had ever done, and she had looked at him and felt the specific grief and love that coexist in people who have lost the same person. She looked at him. He gave her a small nod. She looked at her notes once. Then she set them aside. My sister's name was Adaise Chinelo," she said. She was 34 years old. She had a laugh that filled any room she was in, and a habit of burning the bottom of her jollof rice and calling it the good kind. She paused. She came to a hospital like this one and asked for help, and was dismissed twice. The third time she came in, she didn't go home. The atrium was quiet. She trusted the system, Annabelle said. She believed that if she showed up, followed the rules, and asked clearly, the system would take care of her. She did everything right. She looked at the room. She deserved better, not because she was exceptional, though she was, but because every person who walks through a hospital door deserves to be seen, completely, without the calculations about liability and cost and what their life is worth to someone's financial structure. She let that sit for a moment. This building will be run differently now, she said. Not because the people who work here are different. They are the same dedicated staff who came to work every day inside a broken system. But because the system is changing, the accountability structure, the diagnostic protocols, the financial governance, all of it will be visible, auditable, and answerable to the communities it serves. She paused. A daisy will not benefit from this. The 43 families we have acknowledged will not get back what they lost. She kept her voice steady. But the next person who walks through these doors will be seen, and that is what we are here to do. She stepped back from the podium, and the applause began slowly and built. She did not look for him immediately. She found Obi first, watched him stand and clap with the particular intensity of a 17-year-old trying not to cry. And she held his eyes across the room and smiled at him. Then she looked to her left. Dong-Su was standing one step behind the podium, not beside her, not in front, one step behind. She had not told him to stand there. He had chosen it. He was not clapping because he was watching her with the particular quality of attention she had come to recognize over 8 weeks of working days and difficult arguments and late evenings in adjacent offices. Complete, unhurried. The attention of a man who was not waiting for her to finish being impressive so that he could speak. The attention of a man who was simply present. She walked toward him, and the applause was still going around them. She stopped in front of him. "You stood behind the podium," she said. "Yes," he said. "You could have stood beside me." "You were speaking," he said simply. "That was your space." She looked at him for a moment. "Next time, stand beside me." Something shifted in his expression. Quiet, not performed. "Next time," he agreed. They stood in the atrium while the ceremony continued around them. Hospital staff and community members, and a journalist taking photographs, and Obi making his way toward them through the crowd. She looked at the room, the new signage, the board names on the wall, her own among them. The staff moving through the atrium with the particular energy of people who understood that something had changed. She thought about a morning 8 weeks ago. A man asking, "Who touched you?" And herself answering, "It doesn't concern you." It had concerned him. She was still deciding fully what to do with that. She suspected she would be deciding for a while yet, and she had made her peace with that, because she was a woman who believed in taking the time to build things correctly. But she was also a woman who had learned, at some cost, that waiting for perfect conditions before allowing yourself to be present in your own life was its own kind of loss. She was present. That was enough for today. Obi reached her side. He was tall, taller than she had registered recently, the slow accumulation of a year of growth she had been too busy to notice. He stood beside her and looked at the room, and then at her. "She would have said something embarrassing," he said, "at this ceremony. Something that made everyone laugh and you want to disappear." Annabelle laughed, short and real. "She absolutely would have," she said. Obi looked at Dong-Su. Dong-Su looked at Obi. "You're the nephew," Dong-Su said. "You're the one who noticed the bruise," Obi said. "A beat." "Yes," Dong-Su said. Obi looked at him for a moment with the particular assessment of a teenager who has had to evaluate adults carefully since he was 15 and learned that the world was not reliably safe. Then he said, "Good," and turned back to the room. Annabelle looked at Dong-Soo. He looked back at her. Outside, through the hospital's glass front, Seoul was doing what it always did. Moving, building, pressing forward in its relentless way, indifferent to the private reckonings of the people inside its buildings. Inside this atrium, a room full of people stood in the early stages of something that would take years to complete. A restructured hospital, a reformed foundation, a financial accountability system that was only as strong as the people willing to maintain it. And in the evening, after the ceremony, they walked through the hospital's rear garden. Annabelle and Dong-Soo, alone for the first time, in the specific way that felt different from the alone of working late in adjacent offices. The light was going gold. He said, "I built an empire so no one could touch what was mine. I never asked if it was built on someone else's bruise." She heard the fullness of that. She let it land. "I know," she said. "I should have asked sooner," he said. "About a lot of things." "You asked," she said. "That's where it starts." He looked at the garden, the hospital behind them, and the city beyond. "Stand with me," he said quietly, "not because I can protect you, but because you make me accountable." She looked at him. She thought about what it had cost her to get to this garden. The career erased, the sister lost, the months of invisibility in a building where she had watched and waited and built her case in silence, carrying everything alone, because that was what she had always done. She thought about a bruise. She thought about what it meant that the first person to ask about it had asked before his board meeting, before the federal audit, before the strategic calculation of whether her well-being was useful to him. He had asked because he had noticed. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, the thing. "Don't protect me from the world," she said. "Protect the world from what power becomes without conscience." He was quiet for a moment. "Both," he said. "I intend to do both." She looked at him. "That might be the most honest thing you've said to me." "I'm working on honesty," he said. "You've been instructive." She almost smiled. "I've been a nightmare." "Yes," he said, "the useful kind." She did smile then, and he, carefully, as though he had not done it in a long time and was relearning the geography of it, smiled back, not dominant, not managed, equal. They stood in the garden while the light changed around them, two people at the beginning of something that would require all of the honesty and difficulty and accountability they had both, separately, learned to practice. The bruise on her wrist was gone. The mark it had left, the question it had forced, the chain of truth that had followed, had changed everything. She was not behind him. She was not in front. She was beside him. That was the only place she had ever been willing to stand. If you felt that journey, from a bruise no one noticed to a podium no one could ignore, don't disappear quietly. Tell me in the comments what moment stayed with you. Was it the bruise, the hospital, the podium? And if you believe women like Annabelle deserve to stand beside power, not beneath it, subscribe and stay with us. This channel isn't noise. It's a place for people who believe accountability matters. And if you made it this far, you're already one of them.